Today is August 8th, 2013 at 3:10 p.m. and we're sitting with Chuck and Joann Stoddard.
Thank you both for coming in. Yeah, Mr. Stoddard, if you don't mind starting off with your story.
Whatever.
Okay. Okay.
What?
If you can explain where you were born and coming to Craig.
Oh, okay. Well, my dad was superintendent of schools at Hayden, and that's where we were living.
Okay.
When I was born in 1925.
Okay.
And he moved to Craig in, I want to say 1921? No.
27.
27, okay.
Okay.
And he came to Hayden as superintendent of schools from Illinois.
Okay.
And he was the son of a minister, and he moved around quite a bit when he was growing up. So I started school here.
Okay.
In
You did start school here.
Yampa School. I guess it was the Yampa School.
Mm-hmm. And did you go there the entire time for school?
Yes.
Okay.
Graduated from high school.
Okay.
1944. I have Joann here that she can keep me straightened out.
Okay. And then Joann, you were born in Denver?
I was born in Denver, yeah.
Okay. And you went through all your school out there?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I went to college. You didn't go to college there? You
No,
were living there.
we met in college
You
in
met in
Colorado
college.
Springs.
Okay.
At Colorado College.
Okay, so after high school you went to college in Colorado Springs, you both did, and that's where
He
you
went
met.
into the Navy for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah. I ran out of high school.
Okay. All right, and after you married, why did you decide to come back to Craig?
Well, she married me, and I lived in Craig,
And
and I had worked for my dad and Ted McCandless
Okay.
in the newspaper,
Okay.
and she wanted to be with me, so she moved to Craig.
Okay.
So so I understand, you were in high school, went into the Navy for 2 years, then went to college?
Yes,
And then that's where you met each other
in college, yes.
in college, okay.
Very good.
Yeah, we're good. Okay. How had Craig changed from when you were younger to when you came back after being in the Navy and being in college?
Oh, it hasn't changed much.
Okay.
When I was in the service,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I was out of high school and went to the Navy, so it was still a small town.
Right.
It was a small town in 1951 also because the newspaper said that there were 3,075 people in Craig.
Okay.
And it's more like, give or take, 10,000 now,
Right.
I believe.
How many?
10. Mine is 10,000, I think.
When you moved?
No, it's 3,000 when I...
Oh, okay.
And what did you think of Craig when you first came?
I liked it.
Like-
It was fine. It was I came into a family that was established here. They had the newspaper, and Chuck had been here for a year out of college before I came here, and so he had become involved in organizations in Craig, Kiwanis, and different things like that. So, it was easy to meet people right away and be acquainted.
Right. Okay. So not too bad to begin with. And you continued working at the newspaper for a while?
Yeah, for a long while.
For a long while, okay.
For probably 25 years.
Yeah.
He sold the paper. He ultimately became the editor and publisher, bought out his dad and Ted McCandless, and then he he sold the paper in 1974.
Okay. And being in that position where you literally are the news, what types of changes did you document or see in your time from when you came back to Craig through that time working at the newspaper?
Changes like what?
Changes in the people, changes in the structure of town, anything from the way they put in the one-way street, things like that. What were the big things that were happening in town during that 25-year span?
Oh, I don't know how to say it, how it changed. Because it was growing up, growing a little bit every year.
Okay.
They did not have paved streets when I first came here. I mean, the main thoroughfares were
Right.
paved. And it must have been in the late 50s, perhaps, when they paved all the streets in town. And Sunset Elementary had been built sometime after I came here. By the time our children started school, that's where they went to school.
At
And
Sunset.
Green Street was not paved at that time, but was shortly after, because that was kind of the edge of town at that point.
It was.
And what do you remember about places like the Cosgrove?
Do
The
I
Cosgrove
remember?
Hotel? Yeah, what do you remember about it?
It was my dad and Charlie Gentry and Joe Stanton,
Joe Stanton, yes.
Joe Stanton, and Beezer.
I
And
don't remember. They were all owners of the hotel.
owners of the hotel.
Of the Cosgrove. Partial owners, silent owners. Charlie Gentry was the one who was running the hotel. But it was really the only large hotel, and quite well known, I think, and had a lot of people who stayed there.
Right.
It was, and they added on to it and made a nice banquet room and did some improvements.
Had you heard of it
Over the
before you came to Craig?
The Cosgrove?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just from being here.
Just
I mean,
from-
visiting.
Oh, from visiting. You had heard.
They had a special Saturday night buffet dinner that was
Mhm.
always really nice
Okay.
over the number of years there.
Okay.
And then I can't tell you what year it would have been, but then they built the Holiday Inn, and that was newer, and they had banquet facilities there also, so it made it difficult for the hotel to really keep up
Right.
and remain as popular as it was. But they still had people who had always stayed there and would come back and stay there.
What was it like running the newspaper, and did you have major challenges to, your work or anything? Was it?
Well, let's see, there were, in the newspaper, there were, 2-3 employees
Mm-hmm.
in the shop area, or did the physical work. And then Ted McCandless, he was a veterinarian, and he was one of the partners, he and my dad.
Ted was the business manager, your dad was the editor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it worked out pretty well. We found fine.
They had columns, the newspaper was the larger format, not the size that the paper is now. And on the editorial page, there was a column by Chuck's dad that was his editorials, and then there was Ted McCandless's Shot of Scotch, which he called his column, which was more just a lot of different little things that he would talk about and things he was promoting locally and interesting other things that he'd say and little stories and little jokes now and then. And one was a strong Democrat and one was a strong Republican, so you got both sides of any political.
That was kind of
thing that was
interesting.
going on.
That's really neat.
And, I'm sorry, what was the other gentleman's name?
Ted
McCandless.
McCandless.
Ted McCandless.
So you got to see the newspaper develop then over time, starting with just the 2 columns you said, and then how did
But
it
just for the editorial, I mean, it
Oh,
was a
okay.
full-size
Oh, I
newspaper,
see.
but it was just on the editorial
Mhm.
page, I guess what you would call the editorial page, that these 2 columns
Mhm.
would be every week.
Wow.
That was kind of a unique situation with the business manager, a Democrat, strong Democrat,
Mm.
and my dad is a editor, publisher, as a strong Republican. So
Was that...
worked out fine.
Oh, it worked out fine.
Oh, you bet.
There wasn't any contention between the 2 of them? They were...
No,
No,
there
not-
wasn't.
Okay.
Not really. They don't 100% agree with everything.
Right. Okay. Did you also work at the newspaper? Or?
No, I didn't
Okay.
work
Okay.
paper at all.
Okay.
They had a lot of people out in the various surrounding areas, Great Divide, Maybell, Lay, places like that, where they'd have people who lived out there who would write what was going on with all of the people in their area. And so every week there was news from all of these
Yeah, a little.
different smaller areas out in the county.
Okay. And what were paper sales like when you took over the paper?
What was that?
What were paper sales like? Was everyone subscribing to the paper?
Oh, pretty much so. You bet.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
It was a weekly paper. The Empire Courier is what it was.
Mhm.
When they first came to Craig, there was one newspaper that was the Empire and one that was the Courier. And that's how these 2 people got together. Neither one of the papers was doing well, and so they combined forces, and that's why it became the Empire Courier. And so your dad and his brother, like Chuck said, his uncle was superintendent of schools here at that time, and so he and Chuck's dad bought the paper, and while Uncle John didn't do anything with the paper, did
No.
Aunt Esther do anything with the paper?
Yeah, I think she
Right.
kind of, yeah.
His wife. And so, but Ted was affiliated with the people, the Kimballs, who had which paper?
Empire.
The Empire, and Chuck's dad and his uncle bought the Courier, and then they combined them.
Were there any particular important pieces that you wrote or oversaw the writing of?
Oh, just whatever's going on in the community.
Well, okay.
And, yeah, that was whatever was going on.
He was active in the Colorado Press Association and the smaller newspapers all around the state were many of them husband and wife operations. And so we became acquainted over the years with a lot of people from these smaller newspapers, and then some of them, in bigger communities, Greeley, Loveland, Fort Morgan, places like that. Why, also, of course, have daily papers, and so we knew through the Press Association about a lot of knew those people pretty well, and the newspaper business is very different now than it was at that time, because so many of them are owned by larger business companies that own several newspapers. They're not as individually owned as they used to be at that time. Chuck's dad had been president of the Press Association at one time, and Chuck was president in the early 60s sometime. And did some traveling around visiting some of these other newspapers. He was also invited to go with other newspaper people from around the whole country to a 2-week-long trip through Ontario, Canada. And this is an interesting thing that he got to do there. And while he was there, he received an invitation to have lunch with President Kennedy.
Wow.
At the White House.
And that was an impressive thing.
And his dad said, "You need to do this." So he was somewhere in Ontario, and they helped him make arrangements to fly to Washington, D.C. for a couple days and go to this luncheon, to which other Colorado editors were invited. And so he did go to have that lunch, and then joined the rest of his group back up in Ontario, because the trip was still going on then. But that was quite an experience.
So you met President Kennedy?
Sat right beside him at lunch.
Had lunch.
Wow.
Wow.
What was that like?
Oh, I was scared to death. No, maybe it wasn't that bad, but it was an impressive lunch. I can't remember what we had to eat, but it was good. And I think when we started the luncheon, I think there was maybe a statement made that some of the things at the luncheon that was discussed wasn't necessarily news. It was might be quiet, but not seriously, seriously, but not prohibitive, totally.
What was going on at that time?
You mean in the community or
in the country?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
What it would have been.
I was just wondering what might have been hush-hush.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know that he
Not
made
really
it
hush-hush,
like that, but
okay.
It's just an informal conversation.
I see.
That, no big news.
But that was a good experience.
What was the president like, if you remember anything about him?
Oh. Did you see anything of him on the TV? Kennedy?
Well, we've seen documentaries.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Right. So, but it was pretty casual, but still pretty formal.
They had this lunch they had was in what they called maybe the old state dining room, and a number of years later we toured the White House, and in walking around, he asked one of the Secret Service people who was standing there, where is the old state dining room? And he said, and just why do you want to know this? So he explained to him why he was interested in knowing, and I don't know that they use it for the same thing anymore, but it was kind of they weren't sure whether they should tell him or not.
Right.
That's really neat.
But he pointed to a general area where it was, you know,
Yeah.
and that was good enough. But
No.
you know, he had obviously been in the White House, just going in the main entrance probably.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I doubt that they went very many other.
But it was a worthwhile experience.
Yeah.
Of course, I was on this trip to Canada at the time, so I got excused from that to go to Washington and stayed down there, maybe just overnight, or 2 nights maybe,
Mhm.
and met other newspaper publishers from Colorado.
Wow.
And of course, I'm a country boy. You know, going to Washington and going to the fancy places.
It's a big place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was good.
Okay.
Good experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have children?
Yeah,
What was it like raising children in Craig?
I think much easier than it is now.
Easier than it is now?
It's
How-
what now?
Easier than it is now.
Oh, I suppose, yeah.
How so?
Well, for one thing, we lived just a block away from Sunset School, so when they started school for their first kindergarten and the first 5 or 6 grades, I guess 5 grades, they walked to school all the time.
Right.
And I just can't believe the ones that are taken to school by their parents, and I'm sure it's a safety factor that they're concerned about. And but you know, they did that, and then they our daughter class was
Thank you.
Thank you.
at the time that it got into that they were into the 6th grade, it was the largest class that they'd had in the school, and they had you've probably heard of the original Breeze School,
Mhm.
high school where Chuck went to high school, and it was then a 6th grade school. They
Mhm.
turned it into, I think there were 6 classes of 6th graders in that school before they went on to junior high. The junior high had been built, which is now Sandrock Elementary was the junior high at that time.
Mhm.
And it had been built, but they stopped at the Breeze School several years of 6th graders in that school before they quit using it. So then they went to junior high and then up to over to the high school, which is now the middle school.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because at the time our children were in school, that we didn't have the high school up on the hill.
Right.
And so that was an interesting thing. And you know, they walked to school a lot.
Mhm.
Some of the girls in the neighborhood, Dan Davidson grew up right across the alley from us.
Uh-huh.
So the girls would just go over to Davidson's, and his mother often took them to school. I thought they should walk clear over here.
Yeah.
And so they had a nice friend over there that took them to school some of the time.
Mhm.
But they just walked most of the time.
And you don't see that today?
Oh, I think they do. A lot of them do.
Oh.
But I still think a lot of parents just take their children right to school and come back and pick them up.
And Joann was not for that. She figured they ought to walk.
Mhm.
Did you work, Joann?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So you're able to stay at home with the girls?
Girl and a boy, 1 girl and 1 boy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What types of activities would you do for recreation as a family, or as
Well,
a
we
couple?
used to do, Chuck's folks had I don't know that you call this recreation, but it was what we did weekends. Sometimes they had a ranch down on Price Creek. You go almost to Maybell and you turn south, and that's a road that goes between Maybell and Meeker.
Right.
And so they had this ranch down there on Price Creek, and we'd go down and help them with various things. Dad would buy some steers early in the spring and fatten them up and then ship them off in the fall. And he raised some hay, and we do some of the haying. We always, they always had somebody come in to do the baling, but we go down and have a lot of that, and stay weekends down there too sometimes. And but we'd go on picnics, and we had a small camper trailer that we'd go camping in now and then. And long weekends to Denver sometimes to visit my parents. And that was mainly it, if families are concerned. Chuck was in Kiwanis Club, and he was involved in that. And sometimes couples parties, you know, that they would have that. And then he was also on the city council for several years. Served as mayor for 2 years.
Oh.
I was on the council for 10 years, was I?
10 or 12, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
We were on for 4 years, and then I think off a while, and then we went back.
Yeah.
What was it like being the mayor of the community?
Oh, it was, I wouldn't say it's complicated, but it was just you had to kind of keep your nose clean pretty well, but being mayor, there was one lady, and of course this was about the time they
Paving the streets.
And this one lady called up and about dinner time and complained about something. She knew my number. So
well, you got several calls.
Oh yeah,
with
right.
People with
But this
complaints
lady was
about them.
consistent.
This poor lady, I think, could not afford to pay what she was supposed to have to pay to have the streets in her area paved. And she called numerous times.
Just when we were getting ready to eat dinner, most of the time.
But at that time, the mayor was not elected. As mayor, all the council members were elected, and they chose one of their members to be the mayor for probably a 2-year term.
So you're selected among your peers out of this.
Yeah.
I see.
And then it's not like that anymore?
No, the mayor's elected separately.
What made you decide to sell the paper, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, I don't know.
His brother came to Craig, I can't think what year it would have been, in the early 60s, perhaps, early to mid-60s, to come to join him in running the newspaper, and brought his family here, and so they were doing well. There was also another paper here which it became the Daily Press. It was called Northwest Colorado Daily Press, I think, at that time. And so it was a daily paper, and there was some competition a little bit, but they were still doing well with their Empire Courier. They published their paper on Wednesdays, and then they published another newspaper on Fridays that was given away, and also taken. We'd drive up to Hayden and to Mount Harris, which was a few miles beyond Hayden. It was a coal mining town, and not in existence anymore. And take a stack of newspapers to a lady in both of those towns who had somebody who delivered them to the doors of people in those towns.
Yeah.
So, but then the other newspaper, I can't remember the details and I don't know the dates, and it's always something I think I'll look up someday, but I think was started by a man from Hayden by the name of Al Schaefer, and ultimately was purchased and run here in Craig by Bob Sweeney, who was another Craig native. And he had wanted to buy the paper from Chuck for quite a while, offered to do that, and I think he finally decided it was time to let it go and do something else, and so he sold to him, and his brother was, it was agreed that his brother would stay with the paper for 2 years, and they would publish the paper for 2 years, and that was all they had to do, and as soon as the 2 years was up, they stopped publishing the Empire Courier. And so that was the end of the 25-plus year newspaper career.
And what did you do after you sold the paper?
Well, another fellow and I got in at the building. Big
printing business, job printing business.
Job printing, and I think that with Dick, when we,
The what?
when he and I were in the
This was a man who had worked at the newspaper in the back shop and decided he wanted to go into the printing business, job printing business. So they started the print shop.
Yeah.
And they ultimately bought out Chuck's interest in that, but he was involved with that for several years.
Yeah.
And then they were beginning to develop the Ridgeview area out west of town. He and some other men had bought that property a while earlier and had sold it to this group from Denver who were going to develop that area for housing. So Chuck went to work for them to supervise the infrastructure, I guess you would say, the streets and all of the utilities going in out there, and they started building houses there. And that went on for a while until the company began having problems and ended up selling their interest to another construction company. And then also he had involvement with the Cosgrove in later years. It was down to just the two families, the Gentry family and the Stoddard family, owning the Cosgrove, and the Gentry still running the Cosgrove. And so Chuck offered to sell to them, but they weren't interested in buying the whole thing, so the Stoddards ended up with the Cosgrove.
Oh, so they bought.
And in the process, before all of this happened, the Cosgrove had been sold to some other company out in California, and they were running it. I know in about 1974 somebody else was running it, and then they quit making their payments, and it went into foreclosure. And by that time, we were sole owners, or the Stoddards were sole owners of it, and so they had closed it. So they had to do some refurbishing, bring it up to code in various areas, and so he managed the Cosgrove for a couple of years, I think. And then really couldn't afford to put any more money into it, so we tried to sell it again, and they did finally sell it, but didn't really make any money on the sale. And it, it sat empty for a number of years after that.
Okay.
But he had kind of a on-the-job crash course in hotel management.
Yeah.
Hotel and restaurant management.
Yeah.
Yeah, something very different from what you'd been doing before.
Oh, yeah.
Time-wise, that kind of takes us up into the boom. What do you remember about the boom when the power plant was built and how the town changed then?
Well, it obviously grew, and that was part of what instigated the various housing developments on the outskirts of Craig. And there are 2 or 3 different areas where they began building houses where they'd not been before. And more people coming into the community.
Well, Dick, myself and I were in the construction business.
Well, that's true. Out there at Ridgeview, the man who was the contractor for this company when they were building their houses stayed in Craig a while, and he and Chuck built just a few houses, 2 or 3 houses, I think, and took over finishing 1 or 2 when the other company was out of it. And but it wasn't that big a company. They didn't have that many houses to build and, or money to put into it for that matter. So Dick was offered a job.
Yeah.
Where
that was part of
in Florida, where he had come from.
Part of the boom.
Went back there, so they closed down that.
Part of the boom when we got involved in the construction.
You what?
It was part of the boom when we got involved in the construction.
Yeah.
But
so we have a variety of things.
Yeah, a vast variety.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Would you mind talking about the books that you compiled a book of newspaper stories?
That was his father's articles.
Right.
That he had written, C.A. Stoddard Sr.'s article.
Right.
Dan and all of them here at the museum did all the work on that.
Okay.
And we helped pay for it to be published is basically all that we did.
And it was just the articles, or were there... I looked at it a little bit. Did you talk about the articles, or how was it created, I guess?
Well, each week somebody got a column in the newspaper.
Well, yeah, your dad would, and it was Tales of the Old West that he did in his column. Well, probably his editorial column, and then he just devoted it to these interviews that he had with people around the county. And so they were published over a period of time in the newspaper, and then they compiled all of them and made a book out of it.
Right.
Really neat.
Yeah, that is.
Is what?
That's really neat that that was done. We saw the Stoddard name on a few of the books. We were just just kind of to wrap it up a little bit. How do you both feel about Craig today? How it's progressed? How you've seen it come to be as it is now?
Well, I think it's a nice community. A lot of other people think it's too small for them. It's always been fine for us as far as that's concerned. And we felt we were fortunate to be here all these years.
Okay.
And we spent time going back and forth to Denver as long as my parents were there, and even then we'd go some, but not as often as we used to. But I think it has a lot of advantages.
What does?
The community has a lot of advantages,
yeah.
a lot of positive points. But, you know, we were fortunate to have a lot of friends over the years and be involved in things. And happy to be here.
Okay. Do you have any other stories you'd like recorded? Anything you'd like to have down just for the future?
Oh, I don't know what you mean by that.
Are there any stories that you feel are really important for your family history, or anything that you'd like to have recorded?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Okay. Just wonder. Just wonder.
Yeah.
Some people have a couple stories they just want to be told, so
Right.
we always offer the opportunity.
No, I think it's just mostly been covered in what he did here and how they happened to arrive here, and
Well, too,
that's about it.
I was interviewed, and they published a book.
From the library?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of tells what's going on then and now, I guess.
Right.
Well, yeah, that gave a lot more details about his life, because we found some pictures for them to use, and you know, this went on over a period of several months getting it all
Right.
together.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your stories with us and your experiences here in Craig. Good. Do you have any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
good.
Welcome.
You know, there were a lot of things athletically. I was pretty involved in high school, and after the high school, we used to be a softball league, and they had 4 or 5 teams that would meet in the union, or had a schedule, and I was involved in that.
That was something we did as a family, too.
Oh, okay.
We had children
Athletics.
to go out to those softball games
Yeah.
out at the fairgrounds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we heard they had quite a few teams, and now they barely have any for the...
Well, they do have some softball teams.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, have you seen the fields out at Lottie Simpson? And
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
I think there are quite a few teams they have
Okay.
around. Some of them are co-ed teams, some are just women, some are just men, I
Okay.
think. And so, yeah, there was probably a period of time that there wasn't much activity like that.
Right.
But in the early years when I was here, they did a lot of that, a lot of softball games.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Did you ever play knuckleball? Or, not knuckleball, pickleball.
Pickleball.
Pickleball here?
No.
Some people have mentioned that, so I just asked.
What is pickleball?
We're not sure.
Combination of tennis and ping pong. And they played on half of basketball court. I don't know.
Apparently it was a...
It was big
I've
for
heard of it, but
4
I never
years or something like that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You bet.